So if you've been sewing for a while, I'm sure you have come across a lot of issues with your machines where sometimes you're sewing and the thread just breaks, or your needle breaks on you and you don't even know how to change the needle or what type of needle you should be using for certain fabrics. Those are very common machine problems, and sometimes not solving them or resolving them would make you have to stop your project and you cannot proceed any further. So there are some things you can do on your own, basic maintenance and just basic things you should work through while you're working with your machine. That sometimes the information is not easily available, so I've decided to make a video on this, and I hope it will be very helpful, because for me all the resources I get online have been helpful, plus my machine manual is also very helpful. So if you don't have a machine manual, it might be difficult because maybe you bought a second-hand machine and you don't have the information. So don't forget that either way, every 3 months you should have a maintenance from a professional person coming to just do general maintenance in the machine. Sometimes that means coming to remove lint from your machine, because lint actually accumulates. The more you sew fabric, the more it leaves residue, which becomes lint, and it can end up getting into parts of the machine that you might not be able to open yourself. So you need to remove lint. It needs to be oiled. Some machines that have been working for a very long time might need a complete change in spare parts. So definitely put that in mind when you're thinking about machine maintenance. And the 3 months is just a general rule of if you do use your machine a lot. If you don't use your machine a lot, you can spread out the maintenance a bit. So if you use it, let's say you use it once a week, then you can spread out the maintenance to approximately 6 months. But if you use it almost every day and it works every day, if you use it every day, maybe for business, 3 months is good enough. But on the other hand, if you did a very big job and you had to make a lot of clothes or a lot of sewing projects, then make sure you do the maintenance immediately after that job, because it would have really, the machine would have really worked for a long time. So just consider all that when you're thinking about maintaining. So I guess we begin with the basics. Let's start. So we begin with sewing machine care and maintenance. Of course, before you go calling someone to repair your machine or your frustrating part, there are things you can do to maintain your machine. So some of the things you always need to just make your machine run smoothly is you need machine oil. The picture you're seeing is basically how the packaging usually looks, at least here in Kenya. I'm sure there are other types. And then you need things like pliers, and then you need a lint brush. That one was new to me because I've never had one. I usually just remove my lint with tweezers and a cloth. But if you can get a lint brush, you get that. Then of course you need tweezers, especially for threading overlocks. And then you need screwdrivers for opening certain few tools, and you just need to buy more. And other machines do not give you any tools at all. So just have that in mind when you are buying your machine. We now move on to the steps to consider when cleaning your machine. Please note that it really does depend on the kind of machine you have. So these are general rules on cleaning your machine. This is not basically every machine. There are some that are every machine you have to do, and then there are some that are general. So there are actually 13, and I don't think it's wise for me to read all of them because it might just pass you by. So I just thought that I would compile them here in slide form so that you can be able to have access to them anytime you want to clean your machine. The more you clean your machine, the more you get used to doing this, the more you use your machine as well. So these are generally things you have to do to keep your machine running smoothly. And this is basic maintenance on your end, things that you can do so that your machine just runs smoothly and can last the 3 months before you get to the professional cleaning. Because actually when the machine service people come, they do clean as well, and sometimes they try to clean the parts that are very hard to reach. So this really does help, and you'll see that by the time we get into the machine issues, you'll realize some of the issues are actually caused by your machine not being clean. So do take note of all these steps. I'm sure some of the words now are familiar because you watched the previous video. If you haven't watched the previous video, watch it so that you can know what a bobbin is, what a needle plate is, and things like that. So let's move on to the next. So the next step after cleaning your machine, making sure that your machine is working well and everything is running smoothly, is to oil your machine. You need to definitely consult your machine manual to oil your machine because not every machine has indications on where you're supposed to oil. Some machines have arrows where you oil small holes so that you can be able to put oil in the machine so that the parts run smoothly. Because it's mechanical and everything needs to always be oiled so that it doesn't rust or doesn't cause friction and breaks down your machine. So always make sure your machine is very clean before you oil it. And these points, there are 7 in all, really help break down how to do that. And also always make sure you test your machine on a scrap piece of fabric to remove any excess oil that might come out through your needle and feed dog area. That is very, very important. I have stitched an outfit before immediately after oiling my machine, and then it ends up staining the outfit. So please always make sure you do that. That's very important. Of course, always wash your hands after as well. Don't touch any fabric with your hands when they are oily. So basically that's it for basic maintenance. These are things that you should do all the time. Of course, oiling your machine, you don't have to do it all the time. It really depends on the usage. You don't have to oil it every time you use it, just once. I think you can be able to access, you'll always hear your machine. The more you use a machine, the more you learn to hear when it's struggling a bit to run, and then sometimes just giving it some oil help, but don't also take too long. It really just depends on how long you use your machine. And for industrial machines, they even have measuring gauges so that there's a certain level that your machine oil shouldn't run below because it might actually malfunction. So those are things you should consider, and do read these slides. They'll be very helpful. So now we move on to the common machine problems and fixes. So these are just basically things that would affect your machine as you're using it, even after you have maintained it, oiled it, everything. These are some of the things that can happen when you're doing your sewing project, and they are affected by different things. So let's get into it. So mainly I will just mention them. I will not read through all the solutions, but I think that if you read through the solutions, you can figure out how to fix your machine. First one is the thread is bunching up under your fabric when you're sewing. So the picture right there shows generally how it would look like, and the solutions are listed there because it really just depends on what is wrong with your machine. So this is fairly common, so just read those solutions. I think if I read them through, this video will be way longer than it should be. So yeah, so I think best you read the solutions as I go along. Next, bent or broken needles. Trust me, I have lost my temper enough times when this happens, especially when sewing in a hurry. So definitely you have to stop stitching immediately and follow the instructions from there. But it's very dangerous to continue using a needle. I know sometimes you want to just save needles and you don't want to spend money on needles and everything, but this is very important. Even using the right needle is one of the solutions. So just read through the solutions and move on from there. Next is the fabric not feeding. So I decided to put an image there of a feed dog because maybe you don't remember what it is, but please check the previous video where I do talk about machine parts. I went in depth about what parts of a machine is. And remember I said watching this specific video is going to help you if you've actually watched the one for machine parts. So the fabric is not moving. So the feed dog basically pushes the fabric through the machine, and the solution to that could be that the set for the feed dog has not been put properly, or there's a plate you've put that covers the feed dog that would make it not move. Anyway, the rest of the solutions are there. I think you should just definitely go through them, and we move on to the next one. Thread keeps breaking. This is also a very, very frustrating thing, especially when you're sewing. for some reason, I think I'm always sewing in a hurry, which is why everything is always so frustrating. So there are things you can do to check. First of all, you also have to just check you have the right thread for the project. Amongst other things, you also have to check bottom top thread and things like that. The next one is the machine is skipping stitches. This one is very frustrating. I think generally just anything with thread breaking and thread skipping stitches is frustrating. You also have to check the needle. Sometimes actually having a blunt needle can make this happen. And also just make sure that your needle is even positioned properly, and just there are very many things you have to check, because the problem with this one, machine skipping stitches, is sometimes there's an issue with the timing of the machine, so you might have to call a professional. That's why sometimes if you find the solution on your own, it's a sigh of relief. If not, it means you might have to spend some money. And then there is the bobbin tension not being consistent. That is also generally very frustrating, and you have to make sure that your bobbin is tight enough. There's a plate that you're supposed to screw tighter and looser. And plastic bobbins, I've never had experience of plastic bobbin, but it's indicated there. So if your machine has a plastic bobbin, I'm sure that information will help you. I've always used metal bobbins. I don't know how practical it is to always just switch from a plastic to a metal bobbin. That one you just have to try and experiment with your machine, or ask your the person who sold you the machine if they have alternatives. If you have the option of choosing between plastic and metal bobbins, always go for the metal bobbins. They last longer. Plastic bobbins break and you have to replace them at some point. So the seams in the stretch fabric are coming out wavy. As I said in the previous video, it could just be that you're using the wrong machine, and usually stretch fabric is not supposed to be sewn in a straight stitch machine. If your machine has a zigzag stitch setting, definitely use that to sew your stretch fabric, but do not pull onto your fabric. That definitely just makes things worse. And just read the rest of these solutions, but generally you try to use a different machine for stitching stretch fabric. If you have to just want to experiment and it's a one-time thing, then use your zigzag stitch or your overlock or whatever other stitch that would make it more possible. But it is very frustrating, and I have had my machine getting stuck in my feed dog before, and I had to cut it because there was a hole and it was just a whole mess, and I couldn't even finish the garment after that. Next is sewing machine scissors up or won't sew. So this one, it's not uncommon, so you just generally just check your hand wheel. Please check what a hand wheel is. In the previous video I explained machine parts. I think I'm saying this so many times. I hope you're understanding that the other video is very important. So check your hand wheel and just check everything else that's listed here, because it's not very difficult for you to figure it out unless something is stuck and you need a machine repair person to come and check it out. But this one is fairly simple to fix on your own. Needle comes unthreading before sewing. This can also be very, very frustrating, and you need to check that the needle is at the highest point. So when you're threading your needle, you always have to make sure you check your position of your needle, because once you pull it down, automatically the thread pulls out of the needle, especially when you're starting to sew. You'll notice that a lot. So this is all about just how you threaded, and it might not even be a very big issue, but the solution is also on your screen for you to check. Fabric or threads are bunching at the start or the ends of the seam. So this generally, it's usually that maybe you have not reinforced the ends, meaning back stitch, that could be happening, or there could be an issue with your tension or something like that. So it's just generally just good to check maybe basically if how you're sewing is correct, or if your machine also has been threaded well or not. The next one is thread inconsistently, knots, loosens, or tangles. This definitely would be dirt issues. So if you have not cleaned your machine well, it could be an issue. It could also be a tension issue. For me, most times when I experience it, it's a tension issue. So there's a general rule: when there are issues up on your fabric, the problem is down. If the issue is down on your fabric, the problem is up. Usually it's a threading issue or a tension issue or something like that. So do check that out. The next one is thread fraying, shredding, and breaking. This one mostly it's about compatibility. Your needle and thread should be compatible. You might have a very thick needle with a very narrow thread or a very thick thread with a very narrow needle, whichever it is, you're supposed to check compatibility. Apart from that, there are other things here as well. Fabric feed is inconsistent. So basically, it means that there are many issues that could be happening with your machine, especially if your machine is older. So maybe there's a timing issue for sure. And basically, maybe there's a part that needs to be replaced. And it could also just be a cleaning issue around your feed dog, lint, and build-up and things like that. But generally, if this happens, you definitely might have to call a repair guy. The next one is machine is making strange noises. This one is always a red flag. And of course, the first thing you do is to stop using your machine because you can't continue, you don't know what the problem is, and you have to inspect. Sometimes I've had noises in my machine and I've realized that I didn't put my bobbin well, and sometimes when my bobbin isn't put well, it actually bends and breaks my needle. That has happened to me before, so always stop. I have a machine that actually will refuse to move if there is a noise. So I guess it also just depends on your machine, but also just check your manual. It could also just be a good cleaning that it needs and things like that. So just always consult. There's so many things you have to check. Next is the machine is running, but the needle will not move. This one is pretty simple. It could just be that you have set your machine on bobbin winding mode and it needs to be put back on regular stitching mode. So just check that. That could be the only issue. If there's another issue, you might have to call a machine guy. Decorative stitch settings are not working. This happens if you have a machine that has decorative stitches. Not all machines have this. So I think I featured on electric machines in the list of types of sewing machines, the ones that have the zigzag stitch and all that. As you can see, sometimes you might not have set it well. Maybe the stitch length has not been set properly. That's usually the main issue. So definitely double check that so that you can be able to just do a smooth finish, but always test it first. The next one is seams are puckered and distorted. So basically like what you see there, there's a lot of pulling, and this is just the usual culprit. It could just be that you're using a stretch fabric. Apart from that, maybe you haven't pressed your garment. Maybe there's an issue with the weight of the thread you're using. Maybe it's too thick, or there's an issue with the tension. Maybe even the feed dog or the presser foot might have issues. It's just so many things. So anyway, this concludes my list. I have 17. That's what I got. And I'm sure there are very many more that I have not covered. And if you do feel like there are some that I haven't mentioned, or even your own hacks, if you have hacks that you think other people can be able to benefit from, please leave them in the comment section so that people can benefit. If you want me to go deeper into this and get even more information, I can try, but I think this generally covers basics of most machines, and specifically your regular sewing machine. I have not touched on other machines like overlock and leather machines and other stuff like that. So thank you for watching up to this point. So that's the end of sewing machines. If you have any more questions, please leave them in the comment section, and I will definitely answer them. They might even inspire a new video, because actually this whole machine video was inspired by someone who actually left a question in the comment section. So please do leave your questions in the comment section. They actually also help me inform what you're interested in. Also, continue to like and share, because it really helps more people get to watch this video, and also encourages me to make more videos. And also subscribe if you haven't, and expect more content like this. I really just try to make content that I think will be helpful to you. So definitely your comments are very welcome. I really need them to know what else to produce. So next week, I am thinking of doing fabrics, but I also wanted to touch on just pointers on what to consider when you're sewing certain projects. Like example, things like adding interfacing canvas when you're making a jacket. I'm sure some of those things you don't even know what they are. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to do that video because some of the terms may be new to you. But just basically simple steps for sewing that you should know about if you're just beginning the sewing journey, and that might be helpful to you to just make your sewing projects come out better. Either way, I'm still also going to talk on fabric because I think it's important. It will be a very basic video because I plan on getting deeper into fabrics much later, but I'm looking forward to engaging with you again next week. Thank you so much for watching both videos, and I appreciate all your support, and let's see you next week. Bye.